How much reality is too much is the title of this video. And I'm talking about fiction writing, storytelling. Years ago, when I was working at a used bookstore, one of my coworkers got very excited. He had just discovered the mainstream fiction of Philip K. Dick. These were books written earlier in the author's career. All of them had been turned down by publishers, and only after he died did they make it into print. I'd never really enjoyed Philip K. Dick's writing because of the long, rambling interludes between the scenes of weirdness, the stuff that had brought me to his writing. Entire chapters would be nothing but backstory, like a flashback describing when two characters first met in a seedy jazz bar. Or maybe there's an endless scene of a road trip up the Pacific Coast Highway, just so that by the final paragraph, we're given some important piece of information about a telepathic drug or a robot lair. Don't get me wrong. I read novels all the time that are 100% free of extraterrestrials, dragons, or crime-fighting forensic psychologists who suffer from crippling social anxiety. But I'm usually drawn to those more prosaic books by their beautiful prose. And because I don't read someone like Philip K. Dick for the beautiful prose, I did not share my bookstore coworkers' fascination of reading a science fiction author's early forays into mainstream fiction, where the protagonist spends much of their time working in real estate offices or munition factories as they mused over loveless marriages and unrealized dreams. There's a scene in Mark Lehner's novel Et tu, Babe, where the main character, also named Mark Lehner, is being tortured by, I can't remember, IRS agents maybe? Anyway, the method of torture was to force the victim to watch pornographic movies. And here I paraphrase from memory, pornographic movies, but only the non-sexual interstitial scenes with bad writing and wooden acting. That doesn't sound like much fun. I'm not suggesting that day-to-day human behavior isn't a valid topic to write about, but unless the author can do it well, it's not very appealing. At least, not for me. I guess it's also a matter of personal taste. I love the short stories of Raymond Carver, but the merits of Updike and Cheever are lost on me. Of course, mundane elements are important to any narrative. They make the stories relatable. But those commonplace details that make the story come alive need to make sense within the fictional world. Here's something I've heard in many writing workshops. During a critical response to a story, someone will comment that a particular phrase or action just didn't seem believable. It should be easy enough for the author to make a note, to consider addressing this issue, or not, no big deal. However, the author often will double down and explain how this passage was lifted from the real world. Honestly, he whines, last week I saw on the roadside a squirrel fighting a vulture over roadkill. Okay, maybe a very desperate squirrel can be tempted by carrion. The argument shouldn't be that the people in the workshop are doubting the word of the author, but that unless this bit of extreme weirdness is an important plot point, it does nothing more than drawing attention to itself. Just because something happened in the real world is immaterial. A piece of fiction is not the real world at all. I have this book that is supposed to come out this summer, maybe. The publication date has been pushed back several times. I've lost hope. I'm in despair. Anyway, it's basically a collection of stories woven together into a fairly coherent novel, so I'd like to think. One of the stories involves this Cadillac I used to own, a 1969 Coupe de Ville. It needed too much work to keep. I eventually paid to have it hauled away just before I moved out of Fort Worth, Texas. And then one day, over a decade later, while living in San Antonio, Texas, I saw the car parked about 4 blocks from my house, a for sale sign on the back window. It wasn't just the same make and model, it was the same car. The cheap paint job I'd had done allowed the original pale avocado color to still be seen if you crouched down to look under the front fenders. And there was still the webbed vinyl steering wheel cover. As I think about it now, the coincidence that an old car would follow me several hundred miles in space and so many years in time, it all seemed too unlikely. Yet, I reported on this event as happening to my obviously autobiographical protagonist in this novel. A case of too much reality? True, this book of mine has many elements of magical realism. There's a device I overuse more likely, where I feature certain elements in the story's present, the here and now, and contrast those elements with an incident in the character's past. If there is an aspect of whimsical weirdness in one of these sections of the story, I try and contrast it with something thematically similar but more in keeping with the mundane world. The whole bit about the Cadillac was supposed to bring the reader back to a place more grounded in reality. In my mind, it was realistic because it had actually happened. Just like a carnivorous squirrel. And like that squirrel, it was probably too far-fetched to serve as some odd, casual coincidence, and mostly will just confuse the reader. So it goes. I have to say I'm a sucker for turning my factual life into a fanciful fiction. Just embellish my life with some strangeness. Change the names and appearances of the characters and hope for the best. If anyone lifts a brow, I can call the book a roman à clef, which the internet suggests I should pronounce as roman à clef. I understand that these sorts of books are looked down upon. Probably the best advice is to suggest that you not let people know just how autobiographical your work is. If it helps you to get it done and people like it, great. And if some of those people recognize themselves in your prose and threaten legal action, just embrace it. I mean, how wonderful. People are reading your work. Yesterday I was helping a friend shoot a film, some sort of mockumentary. He had his performers show up at a local park. They knew the basic conceit of his film, and they were prepared to improvise their lines. Just as I was about to start my camera, one of them asked, "How local are we supposed to be? You want me to do a Yat accent?" The filmmaker said, "Sure." So, if you don't know, Yat is a New Orleans accent that is very similar to a New York accent. Brooklyn, I believe it's often compared to. I've lived here long enough that it no longer seems weird. But to audiences not familiar with Yat as a common enough accent in the American South, it might just seem like a very strange choice. And to be quite honest, I'm not sure how I would have answered that actor if it had been my film. My first thought was, this was just another case of too much reality. Just do a generic American accent. But wait, I thought, there's the higher goal of honoring regional folkways. Why not create a plausible way to explain this accent to the audience? Give them proper context. Perhaps an out-of-towner character on hand to make some confused statement. "Where are you folks from? I thought you were from here." And when this character is set straight, his education serves by proxy the audience's education. And then I thought, I was overthinking it all. Just let the actors look and sound like real people of the region and let the audience figure it all out. What might seem like too much reality for one person might be someone else's deep appreciation to see an honest depiction of their community. What is too much reality? And when should you use it? That's all I got. Thank you.